Evening, everybody. This is the Groseal Township Board study session. We have three issues to talk about. We're going to start off with policies procedure language. Joe?
Yes. Derek, do you have the two separate papers for?
Action item number 2.
Can you? Is it easier if you just put it up?
Sure.
Okay. There's two sections that I looked at when I was working on the leadership and retention policy, and Derek's going to put them both up there. When reviewing this, I just thought, when I saw this, it seemed that no matter who's in charge here, no matter, the next board, the board after, that there were some issues with the managers of also, one was an appeal and one was who was running the day-to-day operations. So if you guys want to take a look at that, and which one we'll do the top one first. To promote efficient administration, the Township Board authorizes the Township Manager to provide the day-to-day direction over all the Township activities. And I thought that would be a healthier environment instead of giving one elected official the opportunity or the ability, if you will, to run the day-to-day operations, because it does say or. Or is either side of the or, obviously. And it doesn't mean if, Derek's out. And if Derek is out, he always appoints a manager to be in charge of the township. Or if he's out for an extended period of time, then the township board can appoint somebody as the township manager. So I thought that right there was a change that I'd like the board to look at and see how they feel about that. And the second one that I noticed in the policies and procedures was the appeal. So if I go to Derek when I was the police chief.
Joe,
I'm
can
sorry.
we discuss the first one?
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll go to the second one. And I just want to say the reason, and I see your thing with or, certainly that has never happened. The reason the supervisor was in there was in case all the managers were on leave, which has happened in the past. And then you had, and obviously it's never been for a long period of time. It's, usually when there's a holiday coming up or something, people will take time off. And we've never been in the position where we've said to somebody who wanted to take off, no, you can't, because like in this case, you're the last manager standing, so you have to be in charge. So that was the only reason supervisor was left in at that. So just an explanation. I have no problem with what you're saying and taking it out.
Yeah, I agree with both you, Jim and Joe. I think this paragraph is a super broad mandate, and that's what we paid Derek to do, right? So let's make sure we're not providing opportunity to undermine his leadership.
Well, and it doesn't. I mean, nobody ever has. I don't know, but I see Joe's, taking it out is fine.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you are or anything.
It would take a better explanation, more words, make it more cumbersome. Just take it out. I'm good with that.
In the second yellowed change, I assume the yellow is the change.
Yeah. In the same paragraph?
Same
You're talking
paragraph.
about Dave? Go ahead, yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Township manager is absent for an extended period of time, he or she shall designate.
It says should,
It says should.
but it probably should say shall.
I mean, and you usually do. I mean, if you're,
It's just extended period of time is not defined, so should,
Yeah.
depending upon how extended that period is.
yeah, I mean, if you're out for a day,
And Dave, I think when Derek and I talked about this before, and please, Derek, correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but we talked about how he does it when he does leave, even if it's just a few days. But let's just say, unfortunately, you go out some kind of medical surgery or whatever, and you're out for 6-8 weeks, and then you either can appoint, but the township board can always oversee
Absolutely.
this and have somebody come in, and the township board has the ability, Dave, obviously, if it doesn't look I don't mean look good for you if you leave, look good for running the township. So that's why it was left, that wording as it is.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah.
if he's out for 6 weeks, we just take his laptop over to his house or the hospital. Hook it up.
We hook it up to make sure he gets the right angle and he can.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Anything else on that one?
No.
If not, let's move over to appeals of personnel officer.
Yeah, when I looked at this also, there was an issue that was an appeal when I was the police chief. And it went, the one appeal went to the township manager. I'm sorry, not appeal. The issue went to the township manager, which was obviously turned down. So then I asked, can the board hear this? And it was a manager's complaint. And the board then heard the entire complaint. And then when I found this, it does say no matter who I don't care, again, next year, 10 years, 5 years, I can go back a few years and I guess I can give a very good explanation or an example why this isn't good. But it does say if you go to Derek, I go to Derek, I'm the police chief, let's say at the time, and Derek says, Joe, I just don't feel that your complaint holds water. I'm sorry, I don't feel. And I say, okay, Derek, then I would like to appeal this to the township board. Well, in this now, it went from the township board to just the township supervisor and 2 people that he picks. And if you notice what it states in here, township supervisor and 2 members of the board as selected by the supervisor. I just believe there's nothing against the supervisor. This is something that the entire township board should hear appeals of non-union individuals as opposed to just a couple of people from the board and then make their decision. Because remember, the appeal to the township board, it's over unless you file a lawsuit. That's over. Then you're done with. So I just believe that all the township board members should be hearing any appeal from a non-union. Now, the union has their own, they have their own path they take.
Joe,
You say it's, this paragraph applies only to non-union folks?
Yeah, the manager's handbook
is only for managers.
is only for the manager.
But that's the policies and
This is
procedures.
in
of-
policies and procedures.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake.
So in that case,
No, there is no appeal. Okay,
well, no, my
I
point is,
read
it
this
should
as,
say,
yeah,
it
only
should say
non-union.
specifically,
Well, and so should that be in there?
doesn't
Probably
apply.
qualify it as for non-union.
Okay.
personnel,
Yes.
non-union
Okay.
employees.
Union
And
personnel
again,
will follow their own
For
grievance
Joe,
processes.
just to take it, this is the reason it was done like this, is you have an issue, you want to take care of it quickly. If you have the board, you have to give notice, because the whole board's together.
Yeah.
You have to give notice, and trying to get the whole board together, outside of the board meetings, this person may have to wait God knows how long. That was, and there, nothing wrong with what you're saying.
In theory, 2 weeks.
Well, no, not necessarily.
That could be wrong.
It could be longer than that because it's not part of a board meeting. You're not going to do it. This is a separate issue. So that's the reason it was like that, because the chances, and the reason it said 2, you could go and I could say, Joe, can you meet tomorrow, Joe and Jameson, we have this appeal, and you could say, no, I can't. I can move to Dave, I can move to Uda, and we can probably, out of the 7 of us, get the 3 together. That's what the purpose of that was just so it wouldn't, if you have to get that whole board together, it could be lengthy, it has to be formal, because we are all together, so then there's got to be notice. That was the reasoning for this. So that's why it was written the way it was, just to move it along. But good point on yours. I mean, I don't have any problem, certainly, with the whole board listening to it. It's just getting the whole board together to listen to an appeal could be difficult.
Well, I assume a manager's grievance would be pretty significant, right? It's probably not like Derek hurt my feelings last week, so maybe it is.
Yeah.
I guess if
No,
it is,
could-
maybe that's a
it
little
could
frivolous.
be. It could be. But it could be, that's the point. It's probably something significant, and you want to get it, you want speed. And that's the only thing with changing it is you slow it down.
What if you did it with,
Can I,
Who just got some?
well, I agree with the concept of having the full board or a majority of the board in on those conversations, mainly for the avoidance of bias or, people assume we're a 3 to 4 board already. So how do we,
That's
No.
might be right now.
let me just, again, this has to stand the test of time. right?
Exactly.
So you want to write it in such a way that it creates the fairest process possible. I understand your concern about timing. Could you add language there that says this has to happen within a reasonable amount of time or within 2 weeks of the appeal or something like that? I mean, board members have to realize our job is to handle these business matters. And maybe we say not the whole board, but a majority of the board, a quorum of the board, so that a decision can be made and at least not everybody has to be there, but they can be there.
I like quorum of the board. I think
Quorum of the board?
I think that's good. I mean, because if me and Joe were out of town, at least a township
Well,
board.
and
can get
out of
together.
7, maybe, I mean, we could get 4 faster than 7,
Yeah.
what if you took the
it's
board out of it altogether and just said it's Derek and 2 other department managers?
Well, my concern would
That's
be
not the
delegating an
process.
authority of the
You
You
board.
have
And
a
he
manager, you have a
answers-
manager taking,
Yeah, Derek
appealing to a
answers to the
manager.
board,
Yeah,
and the board has
Yeah.
oversight. We're the only ones that have oversight over
Derek.
the manager. So I think it's appropriate that
Yeah.
if someone is
Yep.
calling the manager's decision into question, it doesn't go to his peers or those just below, it goes to the board.
Yeah, you don't want to go into Derek's.
What I'm afraid of,
Yes, you don't.
what I'm afraid of is any type of perceived impropriety, not by you, but the next step. So if an individual has a problem with whatever, some benefit, some anything, forget what it is, and Derek says, I'm sorry, but it's denied. So in the hierarchy of a township, then it becomes the township board's matter as a whole. So when I see it as a whole, what it does is it takes away. Now, if you call a meeting and only 4 of us can make it and the others can't make it, I don't have an issue with that because you did what you got to do. I mean, you did your.
So would it be good to put it with at least a quorum?
Well, if 3 of us showed up for a board meeting, I don't think we could have a board
We
meeting.
could.
We could?
We can't do any action items.
Right. So, yeah, I guess you could hear it, but you
Yeah,
couldn't make
yeah,
a decision.
Yeah, yeah. And we want to I mean, if 3 is good, then the wording the way it is good.
Right.
So what if we put of the board, in something qualifying that at least a quorum of that board has to be there?
I don't know that that's necessary in that the board, not meaning to disagree with you gentlemen, but that the board acts as a board. And the board, in order to act, has to have a quorum. You cannot have, as an example, Jim and Jameson meeting for coffee and deciding the issue.
Well,
It has to be an action of the
Well,
board. It is an appeal
And you're
to
saying
the
that the
board.
board by definition is 4 or more.
That's
That is
right.
correct.
You're right,
That
because
is correct.
we're being
Well,
very
and is it-
literal by saying the township board, it has to
and
be
I
all
guess it is,
7.
and
Then
it is a board action, so there would, I mean, that,
Have quorum.
but I see no, if you want to enhance the language, to be,
Remove any
So
doubt.
appeals of a decision of the township manager will be to a quorum of the township board.
yep, how's that?
This process shall not.
At least
So-
a quorum.
At least.
But I think that a meeting needs to be called, though, right? So a
That's my
future
intent.
supervisor could say, "Listen, I got a quorum. It's me and these 3 guys." And
But then I mean, you have to
quorum
follow, you
is a
still
meeting.
have to follow
still gotta
the
notice
notice
it,
and
you still have
everything.
to-
A quorum implies meeting.
Yep.
Does it
Okay.
not? Yes.
If we have meetings, I mean, we do have special meetings. I don't see the difference, I guess, because we could always have a meeting, because we do that. We do this now. We have special meetings.
Yeah.
And if 4 show up, like Carl states,
Right.
it's then,
The
It's a
4 of
goal.
us.
But
I
if
think
there's-
it's also governed, to follow up with that, and then I have another point, it's also governed by the Open Meetings Act.
I was going to say the
And
same.
if
yeah.
you're going to go ahead and conduct business, and that's
That's
business,
business.
that is clearly business, it needs to be done pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, which means all the notice that Jim is talking about, and there has to be a quorum. You can't have less than a quorum to conduct business. Second point that I want to bring out is that we're talking about this in terms of managers. I think that the language should be broadened to include all non-collective bargaining employees. As an example, if we have an employee in the police department that is not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, such as Jessica, or we have an employee
Margie.
in the fire
Margie.
department, or an employee in the administration, we'll call her Margie Gape as an
Oh, yeah,
example.
you got Ross.
Then you've got to go
Other
beyond just
non-union
managers.
people.
So it'd be people not covered by the collective
Yes.
bargaining
That's
agreement.
why I thought this was non-union, because we have a process and a form for union
But,
employees.
yeah, but
Correct.
you know what?
You know what I
but the-
mean?
And that's
Yeah.
pursuant to the CBA
That-
collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this would be, the way it's written, it is not, it does include everybody.
So
All-
there's some volunteered
Yeah,
verbiage there at the bottom. This process shall not subvert or replace grievance procedures as outlined by existing collective bargaining agreement. Procedures probably isn't the right word there, but something along those lines. to
Just agreement, period.
To qualify it. yeah.
It could be the end of the sentence, just.
I mean, as long as
agreement.
everybody, I mean, we're all in, I think, agreement on what everybody's saying. It's just a matter of, is everybody pleased, I mean, that the language is clear enough to tell future people what it is, really.
And I guess the bottom line here is, is the board happy with the entire board being noticed as opposed to Jameson gets to pick two? That's the difference here. That's the whole difference.
If you guys think that'll move along fast enough, I mean, that was the only reason it was done the way it was, is for speed. It was for
Yeah, I
the
don't have an issue
trying to
with-
pick up as fast as possible for that person who's appealing.
Yeah, see,
No,
speed,
I-
it wasn't I'm sorry, you were talking,
No, I was just going to agree with you. Oh, I was just going to agree with you that the whole board should be noticed. It shouldn't be a subcommittee or, I mean, if it
Well, if
turns-
it's a formal
if
meeting.
it turns out to be only 4 board members that make a quorum, but all 7 board members will have been notified
Oh,
of
and
what is before
That's what they
them.
were saying, yeah.
Yeah.
The old
But-
way, it wouldn't have been.
Right, that's what
all.
I'm agreeing with.
Yeah.
Yep.
With a grievance from a manager against the township manager or any non-union employee against the township manager could potentially involve significant risk for the township, either with reputation, financially, or whatever. So it's probably best that the board itself is the deciding factor. If for no other reason than to be we're the elected officials, we should be the ones accepting risk on those kind of things. You know,
And
not
also
employees.
keep in mind, this is decisions of the township manager, so this could be as simple as a denial of a vacation, right? So just keep that in mind as well. It can be, to your point, all the way here or all the way down here.
Yeah.
So.
And that's, I mean, like that, I want to go next Monday. Are you going to get the board together in 3 days and have them hear it, or is the guy not going to go on vacation? But I'm good either way. I mean, I understand that, and certainly the more, the more involved it is, the more reason for the whole board. Yeah, so I'm good either way, however you want to write that.
Yeah.
And-
Go with you first.
I'm sorry, you haven't even had a chance.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I would just maybe add at least a quorum, just so that, it's clear that the rest of the township board can be included. And just to build on Carl's point, that the reason I like that is that it does subject these meetings to the Open Meetings Act, so that includes notice, a whole bunch of other things. So I do like, and overall, just like the changes. That was what I was going to say.
Well, and all I wanted to do was add a little bit of historical perspective, and this language goes way back beyond this board.
Right.
And maybe even any boards that I served on previously. But there can be a tendency,
I laugh because it did.
there can be, where a supervisor or any board member might choose, or a manager might choose to include people they thought were more or less
their
in
side.
tune on their side. So, and I've seen that happen. So it's nice to protect an entire future board, because, I think as far as boards are concerned, we see pretty clearly eye to eye. The number of our big objectionable, 2 to 5 or 3 to 4 votes are minor relatively. But in the future, if you did have a strongly split board, this also protects the minority of that board, that they get identified, that they get notified of these concerns, and that they have a say. That's democracy 101. You always want to give the minority an opportunity, so.
No, that's good. So, yeah, however,
One final point, if I may, Mr. Supervisor. Many years ago, I worked for an airline, and first initiation with the union was the idea that if something happens that you don't like, you grieve it and follow the grievance process unless it's a health and safety issue. And if somebody's at risk, either health or safety, then you don't have to do it. Everything else is something you follow the grievance procedure with. To answer the question about what if you don't like, as an example, I wanted to take next Monday off, then the question is it a health or safety issue, or is it something that's so egregious that you're going to eat the discipline and then have a full hearing in front of the board? So there's a check and a balance there. I did have a manager at one point who canceled a New Year's Eve leave for an employee because the manager was upset with something the employee did. So it affected the employee's spouse, and the other couple that were going out on New Year's Eve. Looked at him and said, don't ever do that again, or you're going to be up here on another matter. There's checks and balances, and I think a rule of reason in everything that we do. Joe, I think the language that you've proposed is very reasonable. I would just expand it to all members of the employment force that are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement. And the quorum, I think, is covered by the Open Meetings Act, but I'm fine with the language however you want to roll forward with that. Good work, by the way.
anything else?
No, I'm set if you guys are set.
Okay.
Whatever you feel.
All right, whatever wording Joe comes up with is good, pretty much good with us.
And add Derek's.
Yep,
And add Derek's.
all right. Derek, you're up.
And just to clarify, because that's
Action item.
an action item, so the action item may have to be amended a little.
Can we kick
Well-
it down to the next meeting to be rewritten?
There's
that
no
okay?
hurry on this.
Okay, is that okay? Then we'll have to delete that action item.
Yeah, I'm not,
Yeah, and we'll move it to the December
there's no hurry.
meeting.
That's what you want.
Get the wording right. Okay, this is 2.
Copy of this is in page, I think, 123 of your packet.
Yes.
So, we have a managerial handbook, which was, the most recent revision of that was in 2008. There have been a number of amendments to that managerial handbook. I think one in 2012 and then another in 2019 or 2018 or so. So when Trustee Porcelli had approached me with regards to trying to work towards the idea of recruitment and retention, both him and I had a conversation about some of the things, some of the benefit levels that are outlined in our managerial handbook that we could probably do some work on to make the workplace a little bit more attractive in the current market, as well as go over the managerial handbook to make sure it was consistent with current application of benefits, incorporate any previous amendments, but then also with the recently passed TPOAM contract, incorporate some of those changes into the managerial handbook. There are basically 2 different tiers of benefits within the township. You have those established through the POAM contract, which are significantly different than those established in the TPOAM contract. For reference, the township has traditionally, for its managerial staff, followed those benefit levels that have been outlined in the TPOAM contract. So although the managerial handbook is not a contract, it's not a collective bargaining agreement, it does outline some of those benefits that are extended to the managerial employees and actually some non-union employees as well. But there are some suggestions for some clarification on that verbiage as well in this agreement. So going from the beginning to the end of this agreement, there are probably 21 or so adjustments to that agreement that are being proposed for your consideration. And I've taken the liberty of going ahead and summarizing those in this sheet that's before you this evening. First and foremost, as was discussed, I think, within the policy conversation, was the previous managerial handbook from 2008 only addressed managers, so those of the managerial staff. We do have a couple of employees that fall not in the collective bargaining agreement and not defined as a manager. This contract, they're not handled in any contract. This managerial handbook, the verbiage has been added to ensure that they were included and that these policies and procedures in this agreement are extended to those employees as well. And I believe it's 3 or 4 employees at the most, so.
That I can think of.
3, yep, 1 in the fire department, 1 in the police department, and 1 in administration, so. That assistant manager is the position's title now. So I guess you could claim that as a manager now, right? So.
But certainly it'd be in the non-union.
Correct. Yep. So, we modified the sexual harassment policy. We reviewed the existing policy with our labor council. The previous policy that was included in this document was not sufficient. So a new sexual harassment policy has been included, and it's far more detailed and includes a lot more information than the previous policy did. So that has been added. We expanded section 3.2 to bring it in compliance with the policies and procedures as it relates to the job posting process, the solicitation process, the selection process, so that those two documents mirror each other in the way that the hiring process is handled. We removed the evaluation procedure, which is currently quarterly in the managerial document, to every 6 months. Quarterly evaluations are, I think far less effective than putting them at a 6-month or even an annual duration. So to do that quarterly just is burdensome on management, and I think you can achieve good results with the duration that's listed there. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you here, Derek. Did we talk about a year because of the benefits? Didn't we?
Yes, and that's open for whatever the board wants to do on that. I'm not opposed to every 12 months.
When I looked at evaluations
Yeah.
in different schools, they had something to the effect, but I do recall they recommended a year because the 6 months was quick, and I just asked Derek whatever he felt, but it would be burdensome on him, and the 1 year was more of a true evaluation of the individual, and if there's problems during the year, they'd be addressed anyway.
Well, that'd be the purpose of the 6-month evaluation, is to have that person, that is the purpose of the 6 month, is to let that person know you're having problems in these areas. You're pointing that
That's
out.
fine.
You have until the end of that, your annual evaluation to clean these up. But you're actually giving them notice.
Is that 6 month an actual evaluation, or would it be more?
Well, I mean, it's an actual, it's an evaluation, but it's not gonna be what you hang his ultimate, his annual evaluation is what his overall performance for the year. That 6 month is to let him know how he's doing.
That's fine. That's fine, because we have none now, so.
Yeah,
6
we have,
months to a year.
and I believe we
That'll
also
work.
have that in policies and
Correct.
procedures.
Yeah.
Yep.
6 months, like for a new employee.
Well, that's different. because it's,
A monthly.
he's on probation, he's gonna be
Well, yeah, that's right.
evaluated. Yeah,
Normally-
this is,
normally
this is
for-
for the employee that's been around.
Right, normally in the employment offer, they have a 3-month evaluation actually, and then a 6-month, and then a 12-month. So
Okay.
it's a little bit different for a first-year employee.
Alright.
I did skip number 4. The previous managerial handbook stipulated that there was no employment of relatives under any circumstances. What is being suggested in this revised policy is that family relatives should not be employed within the same department. Because obviously the concern there is with relatives being employed, it's that the relative would have supervisory control over that relative. But, you know, we're a township that has a number of departments where you could have that separation between those employees, I feel. And it's not uncommon for this type of policy to be in other communities versus just the blanket no employment of relatives.
Well,
So-
yeah, we had Rusty and his son.
Correct, yes. We've had a number of instances where we've had relatives working within the township. So we weren't even consistent, I don't think, with the policy
Yeah.
that was on the books.
So that's the other thing with these policies and procedures manager handbook, you actually gotta follow. Somebody's gotta look at them and say, hey, are we doing what we're supposed to do?
Yeah, and it is also conditioned that, you know, applications for employment from close family relatives outside departments of that, where that relative works, may be permitted upon a unanimous vote of the township board. So
Why,
you vote.
why unanimous?
That's what I've seen in other policies in other communities. So if the board wants to move away from unanimous, that's fine.
The number of things that require a unanimous vote, somebody correct me if I'm wrong,
Are minimal.
are minimal. And so this raises this up to,
A supermajority.
Yep. I think that the thought was there is if there's any reservations whatsoever among any board members, that was
over.
enough to disqualify that individual.
and how do you handle an employee, a union employee who bids on another job and moves maybe from airport to rec or DPS? Let's say a maintenance guy. Starts out, everything's fine, but they bid on another job where this would come into play.
Or if you had somebody that came in and they weren't related when they hired in, but then they wanted to move after there was a marriage or something along those
Right.
lines. Right? So,
I don't know whether we need to address that.
or you leave it to the discretion of the board based upon the circumstances that exist in that specific situation.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, I mean, you wanna have some flexibility.
If the board's pleasure was to modify it from unanimous to a majority vote, then I think that could probably address some of those concerns.
I had a couple more questions on this change. One was the definition of a close family relative. And I understand this is a different world than certainly the one I grew up in. We're making judgment calls on who falls into this category. I mean,
There are areas elsewhere within the managerial handbook, especially as it relates to bereavement leave, where we define what is considered to be a close family relative. We could bring that definition over into this section.
but in the bereavement section, we don't go into what defines a spouse and making the township determine that, you know, and then, just to finish up my notes here, well, one was on the 3 points, paragraph D in here. It says there'll be, oh, never mind, okay, I'm in the employment of minors. That was my last comment on the relatives. On the employment of are we done with that particular section?
Yeah, I guess close family relatives is defined in 3.6.
That's, employment of minors, I'm assuming that a certificate of high school proficiency is the same as a GED.
Yeah, and there were no modifications to that section, so it stands
We're-
as,
And I
As
would,
it
I
was.
would remind everybody, for this study session, we're going over the changes that Derek made. If you're into some other sections, because if we're gonna go through the whole thing,
okay.
we're gonna,
Yeah, well,
We'll
that's,
be here
yeah,
forever.
I was on,
So-
it was on the same page as
well,
that.
that, yeah, that's not close enough.
But,
Okay, so that's there. All right.
Skip,
Go ahead.
okay.
do we think it's worthwhile to also table this to the next meeting so that we do have a time to address some of these changes?
No, I think
I'm
we
only
can take this
suggesting.
and at our leisure, come up with additional changes if it's,
Yeah, you can go
And
back, we
forward
can
them
go
to
back
Derek.
and amend
Yeah,
this as often as we want to. That's
Right.
not a problem.
yeah. Yeah, I
It's a
think
matter
for
of-
what the purpose of these changes and what they're here for, we might as well approve them and get them in the book
Or vote on them.
or vote on them.
well, we've got a couple of more here. If there is serious concern about any of these other items or modifications
Yeah,
of
we can
verbiage,
always pull it.
we can reserve judgment until we get done here, if it's the board's pleasure.
And we have these gentlemen here for the,
Right, exactly.
we have a
Yeah.
time issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody had contacted Derek about any of this, so I had thought that these two, Joe's and Derek's had moved pretty quick, and Jameson would have plenty of time for his section, so let's at least stick to what
Okay,
Derek's
that's
talking
fine.
about.
Item 6, add a definition of lateness. As I'd referred to in number 2, the discrimination and sexual harassment section has been amended and replaced into section 7.1. We modified 10.2, the insurance programs, to bring them in line with existing plans, and offered immediate insurance eligibility if agreed to by the department manager and the township manager. So what we have found is through probably the most recent 12 months or so, as we bring new employees in, especially managerial employees, career employees, the delay in the healthcare benefit, which we normally require 30 or more days to bring them online, is a detriment. They go without insurance for that period of time, or they incur significant costs to be on COBRA with their previous employer. So making them immediately eligible is permitted by our insurance carrier, and we'd like some discretion provided for within the policies to allow for that if the situation warrants it. The active and retiree benefit verbiage that is being suggested for 10.2 as well is to bring that in line with the current TPOAM contract verbiage, which is the practice that we currently have right now. It's the verbiage that was in the 2008 version was just old and antiquated and addressed previous plans and previous ways that we were doing business. So that's just to bring it in line with what we're currently doing. The opt-out payment has been for quite a long period of time, $4,500. That has been what managerial employees that opt out of insurance has been receiving. So to make sure that that is specified within the document is just bringing the policy into what our current practice is. Non-union employees follow current POAM bargaining unit contract stipulations in this area, so we just specified that. So for the police department managerial employees, they are basically under the same benefit allowances that the POAM contract provides. Most of our managerial employees in the police department come out of the POAM membership. We would not have much interest, I don't feel, in the managerial positions within the police department if that wasn't permitted, and that is the practice. That is what we've been doing. So we just wanted to specify that that was the case.
I'm sorry, Derek. I'm sorry, one quick question. When I was reading through the pamphlet, not through this, but the entire booklet, and the bottom of 1010, it said that the healthcare was cut from dependents upon retirement.
That has been the policy for non-union, non-PD management. So that is.
So that
has been the
that
case.
has already been
Correct.
in a procedure, which makes it the practice,
That
which
is-
makes it the rule.
Yes, that is the case. Yep.
Okay.
So that is not a change in the policy.
That's what I'm asking.
Correct.
Yeah, because it had, when I was reading through it, that was the, with yellow we went through.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Now, for those members of the police department, managerial members of the police department, they follow a different regulation. They follow the healthcare benefit stipulations that the POAM contract.
Correct,
provides, which-
everything mirrors.
Yeah, which I believe for most of those individuals that were hired before a certain date, they still have dependent coverage.
I understand. I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure that I saw it
Yep.
in the yellow though, the change. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry to slow you down there.
Eric, if I may, does anybody have any issues with mirroring the language? One of the things that we've done previously is that there is a tie-in between the contract between fire and police, as an example. If police receive a certain benefit, then other employees will receive that as well. Does anybody have any concerns about that? What do you, what are your thoughts on that?
So in the previous POAM contract, there was verbiage in there with regards to the fire department. So the fire department, volunteers received certain benefits. The police department would receive those as well. That verbiage has been eliminated. It's not currently in the POAM
I
contract.
just want to make sure that there's no interpretation when we get a Me Too provision on some of these things as well. If there's an improvement in an agreement, that is going to be mirrored, and we're going to have the same problem all over again.
Yeah, there isn't anything in there that indicates a Me Too provision, but,
I didn't see it, but that's a concern that I have.
right, sure, and understandably so, yep.
Your mic isn't on.
The 1010 section, it's just been modified to make it more chronological in nature. Our retiree healthcare benefits and have always followed a tiered, or as of 2012, has followed a more of a tiered structure. And actually it goes back to like 2003. So we have 3 different tiers within the retiree healthcare allowances. We have those employees that were hired prior to 2003. We have those that were hired after 2012. And then we have those that were hired after 2019. And then we have those that were hired after 2003, I believe. So before those benefit levels were not organized in a chronological fashion. So within the TPOAM contract, we had modified those to make those more chronological, which we're mirroring in this document so that it follows along with that. This, once again, is not changing those benefits. It's just
Right.
reorganizing the way that it's stated in this document. We've allowed for more flexible vacation allowances as well as increased eligibility. That's number 13. So before, our employees in the first year of their employment did not have any vacation time. We're allowing for a week of vacation time within their first year of employment. That is conditioned with certain provisions. You can't take vacation within the first 90 days. There's payback provisions if you use your vacation time. If you're terminated, something along those lines, you have to have, that paid back. But there is allowances for additional vacation time for those employees when they come in. So, we've changed from allocated vacation time to anniversary to bring it in consistent with the TPOAM contract. So we had a kind of a hodgepodge of the way that we were handling vacation. Some were allocated, some were on the beginning of the fiscal year, some were on the anniversary. So within the collective bargaining agreements, we've tried to create some uniformity with how vacation time is allocated, and this brings it in line with the way that we're handling it for other employees. So it's much easier on payroll and much easier in the benefits department to calculate when vacation time is allotted versus when it's allocated and when they're eligible. So floating holidays were added in the TPOAM contract in the place of bonus vacation days. We still address bonus vacation days in the managerial handbook. We want to eliminate that to make sure that we don't have 3 different tiers with some being eligible for floating holidays, some being eligible for bonus vacation days. They're all going to be across the board the same. So once again, to make sure that everybody's from a management standpoint, easier to manage when they're eligible for what benefits. We had modifications in this agreement, not in this agreement, but in this document with regards to sick leave. There are multiple tiers of sick time based upon your hire date. We have current managerial employees that are receiving a half a day per month. That is the lowest allotment now currently for our employee pool. So TPOAM did go to 0.83 days, so that's 10 total per year. Is what is being suggested in this document here, is to move them from a half a day, current employees, from a half a day up to 0.83 days per month, for a maximum of 90 days, and then they are limited as far as what the payout is at retirement. So that's capped at 30, which is, once again, similar to what TPOAM is at. We've added OJI language, which was consistent with what TPOAM has. There's no added benefit there. It's just to clarify how OJI is handled. We've added language to provide additional flexibility on personal days. Allowed verbiage, or added verbiage to allow for additional discretion on an unpaid time off. And then the two remaining ones are to bring allowances into compliance for the TPOAM contract, similar to what the TPOAM contract has for 11.3 bereavement leave and for jury duty. So nothing really significant there. So overall, it's just to bring our benefit levels into basically a level playing field with what the majority of the employees are at, and then have some consistency across those for the management, but then also adding some additional eligibility for sick time, vacation time, and personal time, and the health care, which we have been identifying as some of the restricting factors when it came to soliciting talent. It is a competitive market right now, so employees, prospective employees, do look at these things from a quality of life standpoint, and they are willing to go to those employers that do have better benefits as far as paid time off. And to be competitive, I think that this helps us with attracting those employees. And also retaining them too, to Supervisor Porcerelli's point. Not only do we want to recruit them, we want to hold on to them, and being competitive with the market out there, I think is key, not only to bring them in, but also to hold on to them. So I think a lot of these changes help with that.
Did the Labor Council have a chance to review any of this? How did that work between you and Labor Council?
Yes, there have been conversations with Labor Council about this. If there is a suggestion, it would be to have him go over the complete document. So I'm glad you brought that up. If there is a good reason to table this tonight, it would be for him to make sure that he is comfortable with the entirety of the document. He has reviewed the vast majority of these sections, but not complete into the whole document. So I think that is an excellent point, and if there is a reason to table tonight, it is to have him review it in its entirety. So
I would think that would be akin to a health and wellness checkup, an annual checkup
Yes.
for this. And
Yes.
I would encourage the rest of the board to agree to that. I think that's prudent to
Yes.
do that.
There has been a review of almost every single one of these sections by him, just not in an entire document.
Right.
So
Okay, just to be clear, since this is, you're bringing this, would you suggest that we do table this?
yeah, yes, I would. If there are any, there's a lot to digest here, number one. So if the board has any concerns or comments about what you've seen this evening and you want to bring them to my attention, that'll give you the opportunity to be able to do so. That's number one. Number two is to afford the opportunity to be able to have him look at the entire document as it's compiled rather than the individual sections of it. So I think with those things, those two items, it would be wise to table it and to review it, in 2 weeks. Or I'm not talking about a long period of time here.
I would recommend that and encourage that. The second thing is, in terms of the 6-month review versus quarterly, I think it needs to be stressed to our managers that you don't have to wait for 6 months in order to sit down and counsel or meet with somebody that's on probation. If you see a problem that's small, get a hold of it today before it becomes a big problem tomorrow or further down the road. It is absolutely incumbent and necessary that management work with employees, including probationary employees, so that they understand what's expected of them. And if they aren't able to or don't comply, then that's a decision that they're making for us. On the other hand, they're entitled to notice, and I don't think we need to necessarily wait 6 months. I think it behooves all of us to find a problem, address it at that time so it doesn't become a problem down the road. If it continues, then you have an employee or potential permanent employee demonstrating an inability or unwillingness to cooperate with the program, and you move accordingly. So I don't think the 6 months is any kind of a magic number, other than it requires management to do a review. But
That's
I do
just
think it's
normal
important.
of what a manager's supposed to be doing.
But that's what I want to see emphasized here.
Well,
We've been over policies and procedures. Jim, you and I spent years on that.
And I don't think it's something that needs to be written in there. If the manager doesn't know that, then he shouldn't be a manager.
I agree with that, and I think,
Or she.
or she.
Thank you.
But
I thought
do
they
think
knew that. That's
something
why I
that,
did.
Needs to be emphasized. And as far as the relatives and all the rest of that, I note that we used to have a family reunion at the water cooler or coffee pot down at the airport with the family that had 2 brothers, a father and a brother-in-law that all worked there at the same time. And we've also had a police officer and a finance director that were married. All of those were excellent employees, and I think that they've done a terrific job, and I don't see that as a reason to disqualify anybody.
And just one last final note, these suggested changes were reviewed with the managerial staff. So they had the opportunity to review what was being suggested and recommended. And then I did receive some feedback from a number of the managers with regards to, questions and comments that they had about some of the proposed language here. So we'll review this, I guess, when we review the agenda for this evening, and we'll plan on placing it on the agenda for the next meeting in December.
So 2 and 3 will be moved to the December agenda. Any other final comments on this before we get to Jameson?
Well, I think Derek and Carl's points are very well taken, and I really do believe it's in our best interest to avail ourselves of the advice of our legal counsel. I mean, we're finding that we are updating things a lot, and so it can't hurt to have this looked at as well.
Well, and I will say, we always do.
Yes, yep.
We've used them a lot, and that's the whole purpose of that, having them there, because we want to make sure it has been done right. So, with that, Jameson, I'll turn it over to you, but as Jameson's getting up, we started a 6 o'clock study session. We're still in the midst of it. This is our 3rd topic, and we will go through it. And Jameson, you take all the time you need, and we'll start our regular meeting when this is complete.
All right, good evening, board, members of the public. I'm trustee Jameson Yeager, and I'm going to go over the proposal for the Bellevue Connector sidewalk. So here's our roadmap, but effectively what I'm going to tell you is why I believe this is necessary, why it's in that location, why it's in its current state, and then the recommended action. So I'll try to be concise and thorough. So there's a couple reasons that it's needed. Obviously, bike paths and pedestrian. I shouldn't say bike path. I should say pedestrian trail. Increase safety and mobility, and make Grosse Ile a more bikeable and walkable place. It also provides justification for future improvements to our pedestrian system. Can help with economic development and because this is fully funded by outside entities, has no impact on Grosse Ile taxpayers. Bellevue, in particular, is the only cost-effective corridor, and I can demonstrate that further on in this presentation. But the takeaway from that bullet is BPAC, the Downriver Link Greenways Initiative, and the Iron Bell Trail Committee have thoroughly researched all of the possibilities. I think Carl was even involved in that at several points. And this really is the only viable option we have. And then why now? So you'll see this again further in the document, but there is a federal initiative to fill all the gaps in the Downriver Link Greenways program, and they're currently delaying the finalizing of that project for Grosse Ile to get on board, right? So our neighboring communities are running a little risk, hoping we'll join the club. So effectively, we're at a point where I think we either need to decide to do this or probably walk away from it and not be able to fund it. So what this will do is generate a connection between Grosse Ile's trail system and the mainland via the Grosse Ile Parkway Bridge. I'll demonstrate the exact location of the trail further on in the presentation, but Trenton has already committed to their side of the connection, and this is going to link us into several other agencies and groups. Here, I'll show you. So, Downriver Linked Greenways to the Metro Parks, the Iron Bell Trail, the Great Lakes Way, obviously Elizabeth Park, and the Wildland Refuge off Island. And you'll be able to see that. Oh, I guess we've got some cool... I'm going to jump around. So here's the Great Lakes Way. The Great Lakes Way is a pedestrian system that Downriver has created, along with the County of Monroe, because we don't have a north-south trail system in our region like the Iron Bell Trail system, which I'll demonstrate in a minute. So there you can see that's one trail system this would link us into. The other one is the Iron Bell Trail system. So the Iron Bell Trail system traverses the state. The red line is a cycling trail. The blue line is a pedestrian trail, which would be totally insignificant if we were not on the blue line section, right? So we're south of Belle Isle, meaning our trail, in order to be funded, must be a pedestrian trail. Can be a bike trail, right? So as an example, our Meridian Trail is both a pedestrian and bike trail. But something like a Sharrow, right, in Grosse Ile Parkway or on Bellevue, where you would share the road with traffic, is not a pedestrian trail. That could be a bike trail, but not a pedestrian trail. So in order for us to fund this, there must be grade separation between the people using the trail and motorists. So here's the coalition of agencies that are all involved with this program. Of course, we'd like to add Grosse Ile to the list. The driver behind it and the one handling the engineering and funding for Grosse Ile is the Downriver Linked Greenways. Planning started in 2015, and I've got a timeline I can bring up here at the end of this. Considerations for the planning effort were to create a safer connection between Meridian Bike Path, I should say all the bike paths in Grosse Ile, and the Free Bridge, to minimize externalities of connection to local homeowners, maximize benefits to the community, coordinate with Wayne County and Trenton, which has been done and actually permitted, and then use Iron Bell funds as a way to minimize GI taxpayer contributions. And so far, they've managed to minimize it to zero, which is about as minimal as it can potentially be. So that's a pretty big win. Here are all the different corridors that were examined. So originally, they talked about Grosse Ile Parkway. There's significant challenges with the north side of Grosse Ile Parkway because there's an eagle-regulated wetland, which you can see kind of towards the middle of the red line there, and also some significant grade changes. South side of the road, you don't have a regulated wetland. What you do have is Grosse Ile Golf and Country Club's north perimeter, a significant tree screen, some severe grade changes. We looked into Douglas Drive, which is actually a right-of-way but not a paved road, which is a row of telephone poles kind of behind the Hickory Circle subdivisions. Homeowners were vehemently opposed to that. It also created other challenges as far as trying to pave something that isn't even accessed by roads now. There was another connector kind of talked about between Water's Edge and the Grosse Ile Country Club, but that didn't remove the travel from Bellevue, so it didn't solve that problem to begin with, and required additional construction efforts. It became cost prohibitive. So this has been very thoroughly examined to ensure that this is the best potential solution. So here is an overlay of the current plan sketch. So the proposed project is the red lines, yellow lines are existing path and sidewalk. And you can see the Trenton section across the river there. This was an examination of potentially closing Bellevue Road as a connector, and actually BPAC likes the idea of closing Bellevue, making it a linear park, really beautify the corridor. Unfortunately, Grosse Ile Public Safety had significant concerns with that. Water's Edge had some concerns because I guess there's maintenance equipment that kind of traverses that region, and I know that the country club would have some concerns with that. So the road closure, while it probably would have been the cheapest solution, isn't really a viable solution with other community requirements. So ultimately, oops, let me go back one. This is the overlay of the final project, and I'll zoom in so you can see it. There are some areas of friction with Grosse Ile Golf and Country Club. I know Mr. Frucci and Tim Mann came out tonight as members of the country club. I believe Tim's on the board and Jay is the current president. And I've been talking with Jay, and we're trying to find ways to kind of reduce that friction and maybe get to a point where we're consensus building a bit. But essentially, it comes off from Meridian. There'll be a crosswalk over Meridian to attach to the bike trail, and then comes up along the country club's parking and stays entirely in the right-of-way. Moves all the way down. There's some trees that will need to be removed, and we're currently talking about how we might replace those. A row of shrubbery here that will need to be removed, and a few shrubs on the east side of West River Road. So you'll be able to see the exact tree removals on the engineering overlays, which I can show you next. But this is the general layout of it. And it moves all the way up here to Grosse Ile Parkway, where it connects into our existing sidewalk and then crosses the bridge. So the scope of the project is I actually think of this differently because I live on the island, so I think of it as starting at Meridian and moving to the bridge, but they think of it as starting at the bridge and moving towards Meridian. So we'll discuss it that way. So it starts at West River and the GI Connector Road, runs on the east side of West River and the north side of Bellevue. It will involve crosswalks, marking, and wayfinding signage, as well as control devices, and will be completed entirely in the Wayne County right-of-way, based on previous conversation with Grosse Ile Golf and Country Club, where we did try to discuss easements, but it couldn't come to an agreement on it. So the funding is entirely through Downriver Link Greenways Initiative, including engineering design costs, permit fees, and construction costs, where typically we would have to absorb 25% of construction costs and 20 to 25% of engineering fees. They've waived that for us. Going over the engineering drawing, it looks like 12 total trees on Bellevue and some shrubs on West River Road will need to be removed, as well as the quote-unquote unofficial parking spots at Water's Edge, which are closest to the road. Anybody who goes to Water's Edge knows the spot I'm talking about. You're really kind of parking in the road, but it's part of their gravel parking lot. So here again is the overhead of the overlay, and now I'll switch over to the engineering drawings to give you a little more in-depth perspective. So we've already got sidewalk there. So here is the connection to the current sidewalks. This is Grosse Ile Parkway's connector road. There will be a crosswalk with devices here. The device is a, Brian, I'm not sure if that's at that location. Okay, all right. Well, I'll double check that in a bit. They're the flashing yellow signs, so they'll look attractive. The sidewalk then moves down along the side of the road here on West River. You can see the tree overlays here, so these trees will remain intact. And then continues to follow up here towards Water's Edge. This area is where the quote-unquote unofficial parking is, so you can see that's been drafted out of it. Continues to move easterly all the way down. And I will email these out to the board members as well, right? I don't expect you to get a thorough understanding of engineering drawings based on me scrolling through them. So let me go to tree impacts, because I think that's one of the things the country club is concerned about.
Jameson, can I ask you a question, or do you want to wait on
No, we
question?
can take them as we go.
Go back to Water's Edge,
Okay.
where it's running through Water's Edge. Not the
Can we go down
part.
further?
No. You were in the right spot. I think the part. I'm not concerned. We know it's going through their parking spots that we see from the road. When that continues on, is it behind the fence? Is it in front of the fence, or is it right along? Is it taking out the fence that runs all the way to the country club?
You're talking about the like tree fence? Or the actual
No, I'm
fence? Let me
the
look at the actual engineered draft starting on page 11, and that'll give us a better
Okay.
idea.
because there's parking behind that fence that
Yeah.
would be if it's
This is the spot you're asking about, and this X here is the fence, so it looks like it's south of the
okay,
fence.
it's along the road.
Yes. However,
Okay.
it does have to remove the shrub that's
Right,
there.
there's shrubs and things in
So
there.
there's
So you're
a
gonna
shrub there that needs to be pulled.
and the culvert would have to be covered up.
Yep, and it looks like they addressed that too, as well as saw cutting the
Okay.
pavement. This is here it is. Here's the shrub that would need to be removed, as well as some of this here. But this stays pretty close to the roadway, right?
Okay.
It's in the
All right.
right of way, and technically it's not a bike path; it's a sidewalk because it's only 5 feet wide.
Jameson, it will be attached to the road, right? There's no separation between the road and the sidewalk.
It will mostly be attached to the road, but if you look at some of the let me get down to the other drafts that are a little better for folks like me. You can see that there is some separation in some places from the road, and that does have to do with the grade and items like that, right? So you can see here, this is, oh wait, that's Grosse Hill Parkway. So here it is along the road side. It looks like there's 3.3 feet between it and the road as it traverses West River, widening out to as much as 7.4, and getting in as close to 1.2.
Are they gonna have to take out, there's a,
Staircase?
well, the staircase, but the hill that the staircase is on that goes up 4, 5, 6 feet.
From the staircase to Bellevue, you're pretty much on the side of a hill.
Right.
So I mean, that can be dug out and put
It looks
on.
like they're doing a cut there.
Yeah.
So, and anywhere they are
have
doing a
it's
cut-
running along the road, so they must be cutting a portion of that hill out.
Anywhere they are doing a cut, they're also doing a retaining wall. I was actually looking at these on Friday with Jay and trying to remember where the retaining walls were. They were actually just further down in the document, Jay. But there are a couple locations where there are retaining walls being input, which I think actually is going to look, it's going to beautify that corridor, right? It's not going to be all of our scrub trees and whatnot anymore. It'll be a nice path, some retaining walls. They're going to, there's an area, let's see, this is the one Jay brought up to me. If I can find it again. So in this area here, there is a severe grade drop. I guess the country club calls it the sledding hill. I wouldn't know it as that, but I suppose some other people might. There is some grade concerns there. So in that location, they would use a cut and a retaining wall in order to maintain the elevation of the trail. And you can see that annotated here with the black line.
Jameson, when you say retaining wall, are you talking about to the south of the path?
No, it would be on the
North.
north side of the path.
North of
It would kind of go through. It would go through the berm there, and then here, before it gets to that retaining wall section, it would actually move closer to the road in order to give them more room to install the retaining wall because it has to be all within the right of way.
Does it show on here what I can't see even, does it show the distance between Bellevue and the path where it starts in that area? In other words, the width, if you measured from the end of Bellevue, the road itself, to the
So,
start of the bike path, or the start of the
It
path.
depends on some of these slides or some of these sheets. It does. So here's Bellevue Road. It's 66 feet wide. The whole right of way is 6 feet wide. So this line here is the southern side of the right of way. This line here is the northern side of the right of way. This gray line is the edge of the road. And here is where the path is located. So in this position, it looks like the path is 11.7 feet from the road. But it varies as you travel along there. So this one, it's 14.7, this one 13.7, and has a lot to do with the grade and how much right-of-way we have in that region in order to be able to build out. So you can see some of the places where it jogs. That is in order to be able to maintain whatever other structure we need along the path, all within the right-of-way, contained in the right-of-way.
Jameson, question. I know you said you send these drawings, so it's hard for me to read all the little bubbles or whatever. Does it say how big the retaining walls are in certain areas, or no?
It doesn't show like
How tall or
the
whatever?
height it is on there. I think what we could eventually get, well, I don't know. It would be nice to have like some visioning art, but that just wasn't within the project scope. So, but they've assured me this whole project has been engineered by PEA, which is a national level firm. We looked up some of the other stuff they've done. It's always beautiful and professional. So I'm not super concerned about, I don't think they're just going to come and throw a sidewalk down, call it a day, and leave us to clean up the mess or anything.
Totally, yeah. No, I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like going down retaining wall areas, if it's like waist high or head high or low, you know what I mean? That's what I'm trying
I don't
to
think there's
imagine.
anywhere along there where it's going to be head high. I don't think that's and then, of course, we do have a timeline. So we did start discussions about this in 2016. I imagine that's, I don't know, Carl, were you on BPAC in 2016? So this was perhaps the Bletcher era of
Shortly
BPAC.
after I was, I replaced trustee Melvesto.
Okay, so discussion started back in 2016. You can see that there was a lot of different, items proposed. We looked at the Douglas Cut and tried to do maybe a linear park, but that turned out to be cost prohibitive. BPAC did a sensing session with residents to find out what they wanted. DLGI took the lead away from BPAC, which was originally kind of spearheading this as a internal project. So they did a bunch of wayfinding and branding and participated with the township to do that. We did have communications in early 2020 with Grosse Ile Golf and Country Club, where they expressed that they wanted us to stay entirely in the right-of-way and wouldn't authorize construction easements even. I'm not sure if that sentiment has changed. So the project has been built based on that desire, right? That it's all in the right-of-way. The engineering design flexibility to lessen the impact to the swimming pool lot. And actually, I discussed that with the president of the country club last Friday, and we'll circle back on that. And then winter 2023 is when the federal government appropriations and were authorized, so requiring no match needed from the township. We did reach out to the Grosse Ile Golf and Country Club again in the spring. The previous president didn't support the project, And then, Mr. Frucci took over a couple months ago, and we've, kind of renewed discussions about how we can minimize impact to some of their areas. So, the concerns that we have presently are reinstalling trees to mitigate golf ball safety, adjusting the trail to the south end of the swimming pool parking lot at the country club, and then the maintenance shed for Water's Edge is like kind of a big eyesore that's hidden behind a screen and a bunch of trees right now. So DLGI did say they would be willing to install arborvitaes. They've already developed a plan for 15 that they could install along the country club with the country club's permission. I don't know if arborvitaes meet their requirements. That's just what DLGI kind of threw out to me today. So that's kind of where we're at right now. However, what we need to do as a board is approve the project. If we don't approve the project, DLGI is going to essentially abandon us as part of it and then lock in the rest of downriver, leaving us holding the bag if we ever want to reconnect with the Great Lakes Way, Iron Bell Trail, downriver linked greenways, or any of the other components of our Southeast Michigan trail system. Which I do think would be a shame. I know that we're not going to put this trail in and then 100,000 people are going to come cycling through, spending off-island money or anything next month. I shouldn't say next month. We're probably years out from actually completing this thing. But it does set a precedence in the region that grow seals here were participating. There could be some through traffic of individuals. But by and large, I think what it gives is people the opportunity to it builds out our system more, right? Nobody uses Grow Seal's trail system more than Islanders. And this is just one more part of that system to move things in the right direction and keeps us competitive for future grants to increase and repair our current system. So,
Jameson, a couple of quick questions.
Go ahead.
If I may. Yeah, I sat in on a lot of the options we looked at, including Douglas. The consensus from all of the neighbors there was, no, you're not going to do that to my yard, my backyard, or anything else. We looked at going on both sides of Groseal Parkway. Pete Darsnick came in and said, bad idea for a lot of reasons. When Pete was riding and patrolling and sitting in a vehicle running radar, his experience was people speed down there a lot, and particularly I think his highest speed recorded was around 83 miles an hour. That's way too close for anything. A deer jumps out or somebody there, and that's just that wasn't feasible. So I agree that Bellevue seemed to be the least worst opportunity or option. My first question in looking at that is coming from along West River across from the marina. There is a significant slope there, and we can talk about going a little bit north. It starts a little bit north of that staircase, all the way down to the intersection of Bellevue and West River. I looked at it. I counted 19 trees the other day that were most likely going to be cut or having to be slashed back. That's an awful lot. You're also looking at some kind of an embankment retention system, whether we go with the traditional block or even concrete, something like that. I don't know what linked greenway specifically has in mind, but that seemed to be an awful lot for a 5-foot path, and then to be within 1.5 feet of the road where there is, unfortunately, speeders like there is everywhere else. But you don't have a lot of separation between the road. 1.5 feet with limited sight distances raises a lot of concerns in my mind. One of the reasons that we did the new bike path was to get people off of East River between Grow and the Wildlife Center. So I don't know about that. I would need to see more on engineering with that segment. With respect to the sled hill, I think, Jay, we're all familiar with that, those of us that grew up here. There are places, that ground, I think that's the 9th fairway, if I recall correctly. Once you come out of Water's Edge, there's a fence, an old fence, that separates Groseal Golf and Country from Water's Edge, 2nd fairway and 2nd green. that ground undulates. And at one point, you are significantly below the grade of Bellevue. So does that mean we're going to need to build a retention wall to raise this sidewalk up so that it is even with or close to, or are we going to leave it below on the golf course? And then when you get to the sled hill, my recollection, and again, I saw a lot of it when I was a kid, but my recollection is that's probably 10, maybe 11 feet from the road base to the top of the hill. Jay, does that sound about right? And then you going east, you've got another swale, if you will. And so you have a couple of swales and you have a rather large hill. That's going to be an awful lot of construction and engineering. And I don't see whether it's going to be road level, the sidewalk is going to be level of the road, and who's going to pay for the maintenance and repairs on those walls. I don't know that Linked Greenways is going to be looking at 20 years from now saying, we're prepared to come in and do replacement and do work on that. So is that something that the taxpayers are ultimately going to be funding?
So regarding grade undulations, I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't tell you the exact layout of how they're going to address every up and down along the corridor. I can tell you that as far as trees go, if you look at, to your first point about trees, if you look at the engineering drawings, you can see the trees annotated on the drawings. The ones that are to be removed are marked with an X. So while there are many trees along that corridor, there are only about 15 that are actually slotted to be removed. We already started the conversation about potential replacement trees and how we might approach that. But some of them will be very close to the trail, or maybe trimmed back a bit. But I don't think it'll be quite as many trees as it looks like just driving down the road. So if you just drive down the road, I did it too. I was like, man, this is a lot of trees, right? But you don't have to take them all out. Regarding grade undulations, PEA has engineered into this document all of the topography. And of course, maybe we can get the township engineer, or maybe even Derek can give us a little bit more fidelity on what they're doing in each one of those undulations. But it's a concrete sidewalk, right? It's not asphalt. So they're not just going to cut a trench and roll it out and follow topography of the land. There will be cut, fills, and retaining walls. And then as far as funding goes, DLGI did state specifically that they are not providing a maintenance package with this project, right? So they're not going to give us $100,000 in 10 years to do repairs. What they said is potentially, of course, potentially that's a thing, right? A grant in the future to get repairs. However, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee does have a maintenance fund that would be utilized for structures like this, right? And BPAC's funds aren't high enough to, say, replace the Meridian Trail, but they are high enough to extend the life of projects like this, right? Which I think you're probably pretty aware of, Carl, that there's things maintenance programs you can do to try to extend the life of it. And then, if in 20 or 30 years the concrete's in poor shape and it needs work, then, I guess it's the kind of the same situation we have as like some of the other sidewalks around Grosse Ile Township that need repair. But in my opinion, a sidewalk along there is better than no sidewalk along there, even if we do have to look at maintenance concerns in 20 or 30 years.
And if I may, my understanding too is by linking it to these greenways, there are more grant opportunities available for that sort of thing if we would need something like that, I assume, but I could be wrong.
Yes. Yeah, right now we're kind of out here by ourselves, right? Because we're not part of that coalition. If we were part of that coalition, we would have, we would have other agencies advocating for us rather than just Grosse Ile advocating for itself. So,
Jameson,
Go ahead.
do you know whether the water mains are reflected on this drawing?
they are on the actual engineer drafts, which are roughly page 3 to page 11. So they do have the hydrants and the points of concern. They don't have the water mains overlaid. So you would be able to see, like, there's some notes here at the top of each one that kind of shows you the benchmarks and the location of various items that they've highlighted.
Okay.
And that would be part of what they'd have to do anyway.
Yeah, so they've already got through Wayne County permitting, but there's still MDOT permitting, and MDOT permitting is gonna dig deep on some of this stuff, right? Make sure it's safe, make sure there is reasonable sight distance at corners and things like that. So while we have approval from everybody but MDOT so far. So, and then of course we're not going to seek MDOT approval if this board doesn't, want to put the sidewalk in. So,
Couple of things. Maintenance. Who's going to do the maintenance?
So the Grosse Ile Township will own this sidewalk, right? So ultimately it will become our property. It's in Wayne County's right of way, but it's not Wayne County's sidewalk.
I know, and I guess my question is, has anybody talked to the people that you would think are going to do this to see if they can do it? I mean, if we have RDP,
You mean like sweeping, or you
I'm
mean like
sweeping
repair?
and more importantly, probably snow removal.
Okay.
If our DPS people have enough time on their hands to do all this added bike path, then maybe they shouldn't be DPS people, they should be bike path people. Because that's a significant amount of trail that's being added.
Yeah, I
So
don't know what
has there
the-
been, and my real question is, has there been any discussion with the people that you're assuming are gonna do it?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I'd
Okay.
have to defer
That
back to some
I
other
would
individuals on
be-
BPAC, but
Before we vote on anything,
Yeah, I can use that as a
that
do
should
out
be.
for you.
And the other thing is, you've talked a lot about talking to the country club, and I wouldn't, to my knowledge, and Jay, you can correct me on this because you're on the board and have been, but it wasn't the president who was turning it down. It's to my knowledge, it had been taken to the board of Grosse Ile Country Club, and it was the board that was saying
the
no to it.
2016 decline from Grosse Ile Country Club, I wasn't a member of the government, and I don't know the specific circumstances of that. Brian Pollock and I both requested to do a presentation to the country club to the previous president, who actually said it's not necessary, we oppose it, and
Yeah, and that was
We don't need a
based
meeting.
on board.
so I'm not sure
turnouts.
what the
But
circumstances
in
were of that.
speaking, I haven't heard, who's talked to the Water's Edge people?
I had a meeting with Zaid on Wednesday. He brought up his concerns to me, and we kind of talked about all of that, and he said he's comfortable with it and supports it. So one of the advantages to this is, and I think it pairs with Rec's current vision, and you're on Rec, Uda, so correct me if I'm wrong, but Rec doesn't want Water's Edge to just be a golf course, right? It's a golf course, it's a restaurant, it's a marina, it's a pool, potential, maybe a place where sports teams can go train. And what this does is significantly increase access to Water's Edge, right? It would be very cool to see people walking down Bellevue Road sidewalk and biking and families and things like that on a, Wednesday night to go down and see the local band play and have a meal, right? And I think that's a big appeal for Rec. And it doesn't cost them much, right? Just the kind of the edge of a parking lot and a unusable hill and a staircase that's in pretty poor shape already. So Zaid was comfortable with it in the meeting I had with him.
You answered a lot of my questions, because what I was concerned with is not only was it going to take out those 8 spots by the road, but if it was running behind that fence, it would be knocking out a heck of a lot more parking spots that they can't afford to lose.
Well,
So-
and I guess they're going to extend parking into that gravel lot anyway, or there could be more parking in that gravel lot, I should say.
The way it's set up, maybe they're going to reformulate it.
That's what Zaid told me. I don't
Okay.
know if he's talked to his
Yeah.
board about that.
Okay, no, if you've talked to Zaid and,
Well, and in general, I think the Community Rec Commission supports it. I think I'm sorry, I'm fogging up. One of the mandates of, Community Rec is to get kids down there and people into the recreation facilities without necessarily having to have a car. And we do a lot with kids, especially at that facility. And there's really no safe way to get the kids from Meridian bike path down to West River. And to do a sidewalk, as you pointed out, along Grosse Ile Parkway, that sounds like it's not a very safe alternative. And so I think on that level, the rec would really welcome putting together, possibly supporting with all of these questions being answered, a pedestrian walkway that gets people from Meridian down to Water's Edge.
Yeah, I think that's a great benefit for it. And I think that was part of the calculus in going with Bellevue as well, right? If we were just like, hey, we got to tie into this bike trail in Trenton, we don't really care, throw a sidewalk on the side of Grosse Ile Parkway, but that doesn't get anybody to Water's Edge, doesn't give people access to the marina, and it doesn't beautify that Bellevue corridor.
Right.
So.
And one of the things that REC has always been striving for is to get people from the other side of the river across that bridge. There, with boats, with kayaks, and obviously with bicycles and pedestrian methods, that just adds to that. And I know, Michigan is very strong in walkable communities, and the whole concept of creating more opportunities for people to be physically active, getting to places. But I think some of you will recall the big to-do we had in putting a sidewalk on both sides of Macomb Street way back when we had an opportunity to rebuild Macomb Street. Everyone took for granted that there would be a sidewalk going down the south side of Macomb Street. When we started proposing one on the north side, people were like, whoa, wait a minute, what, huh? There never really was one. We did eliminate roadside parking when we did that. But in the end, it's become a really good project for the community. People can walk up and down Macomb Street on both sides. You go Halloween, ladies' night, Thursdays. You see now that there's an opportunity, and so now people do it. You build it, and they will come. Mm-hmm. And so one of the reasons with, I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to assume that it's done properly and do my research that it has been, but intellectually and emotionally, I think this is a great opportunity for our community.
Yeah, and I think that Grosse Ile, and this may be a little controversial for me to say, I think Grosse Ile used to be a rural place, and it's only sort of rural nowadays, right? It's very suburban, really, and we need to start providing some of those suburban conveniences to people, like sidewalks and walkable trails. I think we've got the park and open space thing on lock. I think we're doing a great job there. But some of the walkability and things like that, because, I would love to come into transit. I'm a guy with my boat. I'd love to come into transient parking at Water's Edge, go get some lunch, ride my bike downtown, buy my wife a couple things at therapy, swing by Kroger for supplies, head back down to the boat. And as it stands right now, there's no clear ways to do that. And part of this also with the sidewalk is the wayfinding and signage too, right? Like downtown this way, So I think it's a great project. Are there, points of friction and concerns and things like that? Sure, there are with any large-scale project like this, and I would call this large-scale for Grosse Ile. But ultimately, I think it's an improvement to the community overall. And I will get with Derek about how he and I will be out there on Sunday shoveling that sidewalk. So, any other questions from the board?
Jameson, another two things for me. It appears the emphasis from Linked Greenways is having access to Grosse Ile. And yet when I take the toll bridge, I see the bike path that now stretches from Gibraltar Bay past Bridge Road. Mm-hmm. And I see the sign on Bridge Road, used to be 25 cents for bicycles, pedestrians are free. So if the thought from Linked Greenways is we're providing access to Grosse Ile, We already have it with the toll bridge.
So I don't think a pedestrian can cross the toll bridge.
I think that's
I
correct.
think that's right.
I know
So-
they've had signs up there that, pedestrians
Yeah,
free,
you can't
but
walk across.
That's.
I recognize it's a difference between having a sidewalk on the county bridge, and that, but there's already access, by bicycle and from off island that takes you in a very short distance to the main bike path that I say runs the spine of Groseal north and south. So I don't know about other communities having access to Groseal that isn't already there. The second concern that I have, and I'm very concerned about somebody getting hit with a golf ball. Sounds crazy, but Jay, I'm willing to bet you have a half a dozen or more a year where a vehicle gets struck with a golf ball. And I think if a pedestrian gets hit with a golf ball, or a bicyclist gets hit with a golf ball, I have some real concerns about that. And Jay, I'm just guessing a half a dozen. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think that's pretty close from what I'm hearing. And what do we do? You said PEA is nationally recognized. What do we do to minimize that? I mean, we can't wrap everybody in bubble wrap, obviously, but what do we do to prevent that? Because if you have a half a dozen, it's only a question of time before somebody's seriously injured, and that's a concern that I have.
Well, I think I'll take this in two parts. Regarding the Groseal Pay Bridge, you cannot cross it as a pedestrian. You can cross it on a bike.
Correct.
You cannot walk across it. Also, that doesn't give you any access to Water's Edge, doesn't give you any access to downtown. You want to cross Groseal Pay Bridge on a bicycle, you can, and then ride 3 miles south to get to downtown and another mile to get to Water's Edge. Then great, I hope you've got a good bike. You can't walk it, so I guess maybe they provide a shuttle, or maybe they used to. I don't know if that was ever a thing. So because we are part of the pedestrian section of the Iron Bell Trail, just saying you can ride a bike across this bridge and get to Groseal doesn't connect us from their perspective. So it wouldn't provide any additional benefit, I don't think. Regarding golf balls, Jay brought this up to me the other day. We had a conversation about it. I think that's a concern. I don't think it's a concern we can't mitigate. And we certainly wouldn't expect them to change hole 9 or anything for us, right? I think we find ways to do it with vegetation screening and things like that, which I'm currently talking to Downriver Linked Greenways about, and the engineers have already said that's not a problem to accommodate that. It's just a matter of getting DLGI to include it in the costs, or potentially some other mechanism of doing it, right? Maybe relocating current trees or something like that. But ultimately, if, people are biking and walking down Bellevue already.
Right.
Cars are driving down it already, right? So I think the key would be to make sure we work with the country club to, provide as much screen as we can, potentially to mitigate it down to at least the levels it's at now, right? But I think, I don't think it's like a bloodbath out there or anything. So,
People have been biking and walking Bellevue, from one end to the other, safely.
Yeah, and
So
Jay
I
pointed out to
agree.
me
I
there-
don't think it's it's a bloodbath out there. It exists if you move them closer to the golf club by a couple of feet. It does increase.
Sure, it does
But-
increase it.
But I actually have, because this should come to a vote next our December meeting, where
11th.
we plan on having it as an action item.
Doesn't it increase our liability? I mean, I understand you get, whether you're on the road or on the sidewalk, you still run the risk of getting hit with a golf
Right.
ball.
Right.
Right now, if you're doing it on the road, you're walking down the middle of a road.
But if we're,
Once you're doing it on a township-owned sidewalk,
You're doing it on the sidewalk. I don't think,
does
I
that-
don't think,
I don't
it-
think
I
it
don't think
changes
it
my
gets-
question
I don't
is-
think we,
Does that does
I don't
that
think it
change our
does.
liability?
I don't think it does.
I don't think so either.
It's, you're walking at
All
your
right.
risk knowing there's a golf course.
I do think, and I'll admit, I initially thought the golf ball concern was a little bit frivolous, but after sitting down with the country club last Friday, moving someone 10 feet off the road, right, when you have golf balls traveling parallel to the road, does increase the likelihood of a golf ball
I mean,
strike,
that's,
right?
that's there.
You know, you've got a shot. I'm sure these guys could explain 1,000 times better than me, but you've got a shot group, which is something I do understand, and that closer you get to the middle of the shot group, the more balls
Could
there,
hit,
right?
could.
So I think what we need to do is any of the screening we do remove, we need to find a way to put it back, and I think that we need to improve it, right, so that we can mitigate some of that risk.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that there's a potential here to not just make that safer, but even the road safer if we're able to get vegetation and figure out exactly those areas that are more at risk and increase vegetation there. So I think that's a possible positive benefit of this.
One thing, before we you know, have our next meeting and vote on it, if possible, I would like to have a definitive word from the country club whether they're for it or against it. You're working with Jay now, Jay. If your board could have a meeting and tell us yes or no, I would like to know that.
So the discussions I had with Jay on Friday ended with, I think it was, I'm not. I asked, well, maybe we can get to the point where you don't oppose it. I think was where we kind of ended the discussion. So, but I mean, I'll keep talking to Jay and the board as long as we can, you know, keep making progress. So
That's all you can ask.
I have one question. I get this as a study session, but Jay, would we put you on the spot? Can Jay just come up and give us I mean, this is going to go on a few more weeks. Because
Yeah.
we're going to ask that, can you get some of those questions answered? That would be helpful, especially about the maintenance, some other things before we come back. But, I mean, I wouldn't mind hearing from him if you got just 5 minutes, maybe, if you feel comfortable. Is that okay, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's worth it. I mean, Jay, remember now, everybody, Jay is speaking for Jay. The board has, you know, this is not the board, the country club board speaking, and that's what we would like to hear, what their thoughts are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll try to make this quick. Some of our concerns have already been raised. I don't want to tread extra ground. I do appreciate Mr. Yeager's time with me on Friday. Look forward to further discussions. I mean, I think, you know, what's important is understanding what our concerns are and what they're not. You know, to the extent anybody thinks this is a bunch of curmudgeons who don't want any change and they don't want people on our lawn and, you know, that sort of thing. You know, as I said, look, we have cart paths that traverse the whole golf course. One more path, you know, while we might not, you know, be thrilled about it, it's not the end of the world. That's not our concern. The concern, number one, is safety. You know, the golf ball thing is real. As I explained with Mr. Yeager, there, you know, shot pattern, whatever terminology you use, you know, there are ways golf course architects use these, and they draw patterns of where they would expect at a 90%, you know, sort of accuracy where they would expect balls to go. People can hit crazy shots. If you've ever, you know, watched any golf on the internet, you can see crazy things, but you know, we don't need to protect against all of those. But I'll give you an example just to illustrate it. Right on that same hole, we have talked about putting in an additional tee box further back for some of our better golfers, better than me, which isn't hard to do. And there's a green that's not far off to the left from where that would go. And the concern has been, well, if somebody gets hit by a golf ball from that tee box, hitting somebody on that tee, it could cause real damage, first of all. And second of all, we will have put that tee box in knowing that that is a danger and have accepted that risk and therefore feel like we would have some additional potential liability. And so there are things we could do about it, but, you know, that's a concern that we would have right from the beginning. And I showed Mr. Yeager the fact that the angle from where that would be to the green that we're concerned about is much more acute than what we're talking about to where the bike path would go. we're really talking about a relatively short area where the safety is really a concern. And it's really kind of the top of that hill that was discussed earlier, which is about halfway down the hole. The tees stand, say at one grade, it goes down probably 20 feet from there, back up another 20 feet or more, and then back down 20 feet or more to another low area, which is really a continuation of really coming off the canal, the thoroughfare canal that goes through under Parkway, crosses the golf course, goes to a pond on the golf course, and then continues out to Frenchman's Creek. So it's really a very low area. It collects water in heavy rains, that sort of thing. And so, the safety of the golf balls is a main concern. It's really in that area, but then that grade that we talked about and the idea of bikes, going up that grade and down the grade is really sounds like an issue, particularly in if there's any snow or ice or even just rain. And so if there were to be retaining walls with that sort of a grade difference, in order to bring it, say, to the road level, you're talking about a pretty significant engineering exercise, and one that, at that point, when you start talking about things like that, then we become less concerned about safety and more concerned about what are you doing to our golf course that's been here since 1919. So, those are really safety is the biggest issue. And West River, or I'm sorry, Water's Edge is also a concern from a safety standpoint. As you were discussing it coming along West River, I drove this 3 or 4 times over the last few days, and looking at where the first hole on Water's Edge is along West River. If you took those trees out and moved a bike path closer to that, now you're endangering people there, I fear, as well. And so from that standpoint, I'm concerned about it. Cost is a concern. Look, it's somebody else's money, I get it, but it's still $2 million we're talking about spending here for something that I really, and other people that I talk to, kind of shake their head at whether this is really necessary. It is, if you spend any time on Bellevue at any time of the day, there are not that many cars. There are not that many people walking or biking or driving on that road. It's probably one of the most sparsely used roads on Grosse Ile, other than residential neighborhood streets. And then the maintenance, that was raised. The trees, that's a significant concern. I've heard the discussion about moving some of the trees. We have, as I was explaining to Mr. Yeager, we have a tree committee. We have a tree inventory of every tree on the golf course, approximate age, the type of tree, how long it's expected to live, whether it's significant to the golf course or whether it's significant as from a beauty standpoint. And so when we look at those, these aren't some of our more significant trees, but I say that to say that these are, we think they're very important. And one of the concerns is that the trees that are there now are a pretty good barrier for tee shots that go towards the road. There are a lot of them bunched there. We haven't removed them in large part because of the concern that, well, hey, that protects the road. And so when you start moving things closer in, and it sounded like from the drawings, and Mr. Yeager didn't have it figured out at the time when we met on Friday, but we'll share them with me. But those, where in those engineering drawings we can see how far off the roadway we're talking. But if you're talking about moving from where the road is now, add 10, 12 feet plus 5 feet, and now you're talking 15 to 20 feet closer in to where those golf balls are flying. And that's really, been our biggest concern. And then, I think the one other concern I just want to raise that is important is, as it's currently drawn, we would lose 15 parking spots near the pool. And those are important. We did talk about the potential for pushing that close to the road. And then I know I'm taking up time. You guys are way over your scheduled time already, so I don't want to go too long. And just a couple of last points. We're just on the alternatives. It seems like the road closure. We would have no objection to that. At least, I don't think we would have an objection to that. To your point, I'm speaking as myself. It's not something we've discussed as a board. But we could certainly have some members who would say, wait a minute, that's how I get there.
Yeah.
Don't close that. But if that were to happen, I heard public safety is a concern. I've seen bollards used, things like that, to block off temporarily that can be moved for public safety and things like that. It seems like if the issue is our public safety, it seems like that's a manageable problem. It's Wayne County. Now you're in a whole different world. I get that. That's a different story. And then, if we're looking at alternatives, I think anything that could be tight to the roadway. I think Mr. Yeager and I discussed the fact that he didn't know at the time what the minimum, distance was or what could be that barrier. He mentioned that to be pedestrian friendly, there has to be a separation. And we discussed whether that could be, 1 foot of gravel. Could it be a physical barrier? There's some of in the slideshow that he used. There were a couple of examples of those that could potentially create that barrier. If something like that could be used now, instead of being 15 to 20 feet closer to the center line of the golf course of the golf hole, you're now talking about 5 or 6 feet closer, which is a totally different story from a safety standpoint and from a grade standpoint. You can just build into the existing grade instead of having to create something new that's 10 or so feet away from the roadway. But I encourage anybody who's interested in this, take those drawings and go out on Bellevue and look at what we're talking about. I think you'll see where our, kind of scratching our head trying to figure out how in the world this is going to work. I get it. We're not trying to be objectionable here, but we do want to make sure that these concerns are heard, and I'm just not sure that the practical considerations have fully been thought through yet. But we'll have further discussions, and we're happy to meet once we know better what the final proposal is.
Certainly, we would appreciate it if you continued your discussions with Mr. Yeager, and like I say, if we could get, I believe our meeting is December 11th. If we could get a definitive from your board what their thoughts are, which is yes or no, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think the more fully baked the proposal is, the better. Conceptually, as it stands right now, I think it'd be pretty easy to come up with an answer, but I don't think we have all the information at this time, so it'd be premature for us to.
Sure.
And probably not fruitful for us to do that at this point.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Jay.
And if anybody has any other questions about it, I'm happy to. I've already spoken with several of you. Happy to have further discussions if you have questions after this. Thanks. Any other questions now?
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
The only so I'll get an answer on the retaining walls, what they look like, and where their placement will be, right? Because I think that's something that's a little fuzzy for us right now. And discuss the grade adjustments, and then I would just point out that during the summer months, there are 250 people a day that use Meridian Trail at Bellevue. So it's not like an insignificant number of people using our bike trail system. It's a significant chunk of our population, right? So being able to expand the bike trail system, I think, is pretty much a good thing, right? Let's work out the practicalities and the externalities, but I think it's usually a win. So thank you very much for your time.
Jameson, one last question, if I may.
I already said thank you, Carl.
Yeah, Carl. And Carl, you may not.
Just a quick question. It'll take longer for me to. If you were to do the sidewalk from Parkway to Bellevue, and then, as Jay discussed and you discussed, closing Bellevue, and I know that's a Wayne County road, and we'd have Wayne County there.
So they wouldn't fund that. We would have to fund that.
The closing of Wayne County, or that
The closing
sidewalk
of
between.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So
let's say we take.
we could close the road. You're right.
Okay.
But we received opposition for that from everybody. So nobody liked that.
Least worst alternative. But again, as an option, you close Bellevue from, call it the halfway house, the swimming pool, down to Water's Edge, so you still have access to both parking lots. And then you have the sidewalk that runs along West River from Groseal Parkway to Bellevue. Is that something that's possible?
I think it's theoretically possible. I don't know if I mean, it would have to be closed, right? Not like kind of closed. Otherwise, DLGI isn't going to fund the other portions of the sidewalk, right? It has to be a pedestrian right of way, not just a bike right of way, I guess. So I don't know, Brian, you got a more concise or more?
You're answering very well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You could be a politician,
so I
Brian.
think that could potentially be possible. I think we would need to get a commitment from Wayne County and to bring that back to DLGI and ask them to do the other sections of pavement.
The reason I ask that, we talked about maintenance, and I understand expanding the life expectancy on bike paths and sidewalks and things like that. But Brian, I remembered we had a meeting where I believe it was John Hennessy, who sits on BPAC, had indicated you should be looking at around 10% per year on replacement. And we already have 10 miles of trails. And if we're spending $2 million on this, I don't know what the life expectancy is, but at some point there's going to be some significant money, and you're going to have a millage with that. So I'm looking at maybe doing something different with Bellevue as an option. Certainly a cost-effective option, because 10 miles, 10% is roughly a mile a year on what we have that's existing, and that's what John had indicated. And I think, Brian, you agreed with that with your experience with Wayne County. So I'm looking at not only the cost right now, I understand it's free, but when we start looking at having to maintain it and being responsible for it, I love the idea. I'm just concerned about the execution and how we make that pay. So
yeah, let's see what we come back with in December, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jameson. Good.
thank you, Jameson.
Good. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll start our regular meeting.